Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Collin Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Dan Fantasia. He's the CEO over at Treeline, and we're going to talk hiring, recruiting, and how to understand if you got the right talent going into next year. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Collin. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for coming on. I know you work with a lot of sales leaders. I thought we would just kind of start. What trends are you seeing in people's planning for next year?
Yeah. So, we only work with sales leaders. And right now, there's a lot of fear, uncertainty. There's a lot of doubt, suspicions, as to what's happening in the market. Not only what's happening in the market, what's happening internally, what's happening on their team, right? There's so much doubt. Do I have the right people in place? Do I have the right people on the bus? Do I have, the right talent? Do I need to be looking for new talent? So because the market's a little bit off and because folks are a little bit unsure, it creates doubt in, other areas, including, the talent pool, of course.
And when we're looking into planning, I mean, I guess uncertainty and doubt about numbers is kind of one thing. We're running into a lot of people that are looking at that end of year Q4, 2023 goal, and they're going, I don't think I'm going to hit it. Help me understand why. Are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, but they're also, part of that is, so as a leader, you're looking at the numbers and you're saying, all right, are we going to hit this? And the entire executive team's wondering if you're going to hit it. But as a CRO or a VP or a sales manager, partially what you're thinking about is, am I going to hit it? And if I don't hit it, am I going to be able to sustain my team? Am I going to lose people? Am I going to lose a low producer or top producer? Is there doubt from their part as well? So a lot of executives, a lot of CSOs, CROs, like I said, sales managers, they're trying to assess where they are in the market today. Are they going to hit their numbers so they can report it up and the company does well? And how are they going to sustain the team they have in place, especially keeping the A producers? So those are that's where everyone is kind of right now, right? It's just up in the air.
Fair. And I mean, I imagine there's a whole lot of uncertainty about the market, but imagine there's also, when you're looking at it, okay, why didn't we hit? Why are we off track? There's also trying to understand if we got the right people.
Yeah. It's when you look at your numbers, it's in sales, it's pretty easy to figure out, who the right people are, who the right people aren't, or who the wrong people are, I should say. But identifying and knowing your A players and then keeping them. And by the way, an A player is not just someone that hits their numbers, right? It's not just someone that books revenue or overachieves. It's also someone that shares the same company like core values, right? It's someone that is invested, is dynamically charged, is helping the company grow, is sticking together with the team and the message so that everyone can kind of do it together. So it's revenue. It's also, belief in the environment, the culture, and what the company's trying to do.
Love that. I'm curious, when we're looking at internal teams and say I'm looking at my team, I mean, obviously there's the kind of core value side and the productivity side. What's your process for trying to understand kind of right people, wrong people? Maybe walk me a little bit deeper than kind of core values and just, are they on quota or not?
Yeah. So, I can tell you what we do at Treeline. We look at productivity, and I'll tell you why, because throughout my career, I have been confused or lost perspective because you have a top you have a top sales rep that may not share the same core values. And what I have found is that is really hard to identify and understand, and then it's really hard to act on that. And the reason why that's so critical is because the top producer that doesn't share the same core values usually brings down the environment. And so they're kind of rolling, while they're hitting their own numbers, they're kind of rolling against the rest of the culture. And it's not healthy. And over time, it just kind of erodes that environment. So at Treeline, what we do is we look at productivity. Actually, we graph it. We look at productivity and we look at core values. And so if someone is high productivity and high core values, they're in the top right-hand point of the chart. That means that they're an A producer or a potential A producer, right? And those are the people that we want. If we have a potential A producer, we're always trying to push up their core values and their productivity so they become an A producer. If they have high core values, so for example, one of our core values is grit. One of our core values is compete to win. So if they're finding challenging times, but they have the grit to hang in there and get through it, then great. They rank high on the core value chart, on the core value side. If they are ready to compete to win, and that means that they're pushing themselves to work hard, to do more calls than they typically do, or setting goals and holding themselves accountable, then we know they're high on the core value chart. If they're lower in productivity, it's okay because we know we can coach them up. If they share the same core values and they are doing everything that we would do, right? They have grit, they compete to win, they're empowering themselves, right? They do what's right. If they have that inherently in them, we know that we can coach those individuals up to become A players. Now, if you have someone that's high productivity but low core value, that means they're kind of a drain on the culture and the system. So while they're booking their business, they may be distracting 2 or 3 or more individuals from being successful in their role. And so you don't see that very quickly because you just see them hitting your numbers. And they're hitting their numbers and they're helping you with your revenue goals. But what happens is if they have low core values, and as you do a talent assessment, or if you do, as you're looking to coach them, if they still can't fix those core values and they can't live them every day, and they're not in lockstep with you and the rest of the company, then there's nothing you can do. They become cancerous, and over time, they erode again that culture. So what we always do is we look at productivity and core values, and we coach on both ends. We coach the core values and the productivity, and that's how we ensure we get A players. If we're coaching and finding that a person can hit their productivity numbers, but their core values are low, there's really nothing we can do to help that individual if we've given them the time, the coaching, the effort to become a true member of the company and the culture, and to live those core values every day. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I follow you. I think we follow EOS, and they've got an idea of like culture fit, and then get it, want it, has the capacity, GWC. And so it's kind of your own version of that, where you separate cultural fit versus performance in the role.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then you coach both of them up together at the same time. And if they can't understand that, it's then they're really not coachable. It's really you're in a tough situation.
Right on. And yeah, I totally agree. One of the things we discussed in the pre-interview was a method for going a little bit deeper than this. Can you talk to me a little bit about top grading?
Sure. Yeah. So when companies are, obviously you need to assess your team, and hopefully the ultimate goal would be that you have A potential producers and you're trying to get them to all A players. The ultimate would be to have all of them as A players. Mm-hmm. If you don't have A players and you have, let's say, a B player, what you really want to start thinking about is, based on economic conditions, based on your core customer, is the team you have in place, are they effective enough, or do they have the ability to sell in this new environment? And if you find that they will always be a B player and you can't coach them up, then you will need, no matter how much you like them, you will need to look to top grade them. And that means you need to find those individuals that can sell in this new environment, depending on what's changed, that does have shares the same core values, and has the ability to acclimate and help you grow your business. So ultimately what you're doing is, if you just can't get an employee to where you need them to be, at some point you need to top grade them so that a new employee can come in that has, potentially the skill set in a changing environment to help your company grow and find, greater success.
Gotcha. So top grading is basically moving them out and finding new folks to bring in that are going to be better fits for the role.
Yeah, exactly. Because things change. I mean, sales changes. Your environment changes, the economy, everything changes. So You just need to have a finger on the pulse and figure out what's happening, what's going on around you.
Totally. You mentioned something about being able to sell in this environment. I'm curious, what are you looking for in reps now, and what's changed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, while we in this particular market, we are looking for individuals that have a proven track record, that have done this before, because it is unfair to bring a person into a aggressive market that doesn't have the skill set. You basically put them at a disadvantage, and it's really unfair to them to expect them to meet and exceed their goals while they're competing against other really talented A players that have the skill set and experience to find success. So we're finding that you need more mature individuals that understand the business, that can ramp up and understand how to ramp up. Because if they don't have that, you're setting them up for failure.
What if there are folks that are listening that are maybe that have less of a track record and they're looking for something new? What advice would you give to them for developing to be that individual that's going to get placed in a premium role?
I would say, personally, I'd say don't oversell yourself, but actually have a genuine conversation with an organization, talking about your strengths and weaknesses, and fill a hole where you can sustain a career. It's not about making the most amount of money. It's about finding a great company, a good culture, a good compensation plan, but a company that's going to train you, mentor you, teach you, sustain you, so that you can fight through challenging times, learn how to sell in these, in this economy, and then continue to find greater successes. So for me, it's about finding the right culture, the right company, the right core values, so that you can sustain yourself and not get in over your head and find yourself looking for a new opportunity in 6 months.
Fair. So don't shoot too big and try, I guess, hitting fastballs out of your league that you're not gonna be able to swing at.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm not saying don't sell yourself. I'm saying don't oversell yourself. If you are, I'm not saying don't go for it, but in this market, it's a little bit, it's more challenging. And so because it's more challenging, you want to make sure you can find success. Without success, what's the use of putting a company on your resume for 6 months or 8 months or 9 months and failing at it? I mean, now you have to go tell that story. Well, you're better off telling, a story about success and progression and growth. Right now with our customers, what they look for is they're looking for a specific individual, right? There's a million people applying to jobs. They're coming to us because they're looking for someone very specific, a niche individual that they can't find on their own, right? Mm-hmm. And so as a result, the qualifications to find that individual, the time to do a search to find the right person takes a little bit longer, because companies can afford to be selective, and they can afford to top grade, they can afford to find better talent for their current selling environment.
Gotcha. I had a good question lined up, and then I got distracted listening to you. Apologies. I want to maybe turn a little bit externally now. So if I'm a company that's looking for new folks, what's your process for? There's the question. So basically, I had a previous podcast guest, and I can't remember the name. I could see his face, and he was at Patient Pop. He was their CRO or VP of sales, and he made a comment to me that really stuck. That said, the most important thing he looks for is not just a track record, but a track record with this particular sales motion. It doesn't have to be with a particular industry or vertical, but say it's selling to VPs, a product that is, 10 to 50K. That was more important than somebody who had experience in their particular vertical. What's your take on that? Is that true across the board? Are there particular niches where that's not true at all? I'd love your thoughts.
I would agree, by the way, with him or her. So when we sit down with a company, we're trying to understand, we're asking lots of questions. We're asking average sales size, sales cycle. We're talking about quotas and, which is it's so important to understand. We're trying to figure out if the person is, if it's a transactional environment or a strategic environment, the audience they're selling to, the size of the client they're selling to. There's so much data that we're gathering so that we understand the selling characteristics of the sales environment. And then we can align that with the selling characteristics of, a sales representative. There are some industries that you do need a person selling into the industry because of the complexity of getting your foot in the door. And so while I'm not saying that you need to have a Rolodex or a database of individuals, anyone that comes to you and says, I have this Rolodex of individuals and I'm going to come from this company to your company and I'm going to crush it. I'm going to bring everyone over with me. That's unrealistic. If anything, it would throw up red flags. But their ability to sell into a specific environment, if they're selling into health tech or if they're selling into hospitals and they have an understanding of how to sell into hospitals and they can explain how they get their foot in the door, not because they just have a name in a database, but because they actually have a process around how they get their foot in the door, how they leverage their experience and how they sell, then that is an individual that, yes, I would seriously consider. If they're selling into that vertical. Now, the software they sell is I think can be learned. It is not as important as their ability in their playbook to sell into a specific vertical, into a specific audience.
Understood. Yeah, I'm generally in agreement. Like it's almost like a different sport when you go up a level. Like I'm pretty good in the kind of, like right now, I've got most of my experiences in the 20 to 150K kind of range. Once you step up into the $500 to $5 million range, it's like going from playing basketball to baseball, right? Both are played with balls, but the rules are changed. The positions are different. There's a complexity to it that makes it certain people are better fit with certain sales motions. Like I particularly like the shorter sales cycle where you're closing deals in 2 months. I don't have the attention span or the give a shit that lasts long enough to close a 2-year deal. Like it's just, I don't care that much about anything. I don't think.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think like selling products or service, the same thing. Right? It's just a different motion. Size of company that you've worked at, different motion, right? If you've worked at a huge organization, you come into a smaller startup, many times there's challenges with that, and sometimes vice versa. So, to be honest, Collin, you really need to talk to a company to understand how they sell, what their sales model looks like, and then you can add value and make recommendations on finding talent or top talent to, grow revenue.
Right on. I did manage to find the episode. It was Justin Welsh was the person. We were talking about episode 156 for those that want to check it out. I have these things and I appreciate you battle testing them with me because, I hear a guest and they say a thing and I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. I trust Dan. I trust Justin. This has got to be true. And then I just sometimes accept it blindly. And so I've been trying to like bring those ideas back and say, hey, let's resurface this. Is what I believe actually true? Especially when we get into it with a guest who has similar experience and can validate and validate.
So I mean, if a lot of times companies will come to us and say, just, what, I want someone from my competitor. I want a top producer from my competitor. And that's not always great. I mean, it's going to cost you a lot of money, number one, because they're going to leverage what they've done, what they have, and why should they leave, number one. Number two is you don't know how they became number one. Sometimes with a small organization, were they their first salesperson were they given a whole bunch of large accounts? Right? What is the backstory? So I do agree with that past guest because I would look for not just the competitor, but I would look for the talent, right? The folks that share that same rhythm, and those individuals tend to be identifying them and finding them tend to be the top producers.
Totally. Here's one of the reasons why I don't necessarily care about getting somebody from a competitor or like even a similar software or like software services, I care less. There's a company local in Vancouver called Hootsuite. They're big in the social media. And this is probably not true about them today, but I knew a bunch of people in the early days. And there were, I'm not trying to make any comments about their sales org, just there were particular reps that were on their quota performance were absolute monsters that you look at this person and be like, this is $1 million rep, right? Like this person's made. And then you look at another rep who is doing, 20% of their quota. And you're like, why is there such a disparity? And if you only looked at those two reps and their numbers on a resume, it doesn't make any sense. You meet them both, you're like, well, they both seem like good reps. And then you realize one was in like the golden market. They had a particular market that did particularly well. And then the secondary rep who was closing a whole lot less was actually a better rep because they were closing all these deals in a harder to reach market. So you've got two reps and you're like, okay, well, one did, I can't remember what the numbers were, but an extreme amount, and one did just kind of a medium amount. It's a big important piece that we need to look at. What's the context? What market did you serve? What did people in other markets do? Was it just because you had the greatest market? Were you the first rep? Were you the VP's favorite? You got all the good leads?
Yeah. And it takes, one of the reasons why I think our clients appreciate our services, we talk to every single rep. We interview every one of them, because in sales, you can't just look at a resume and then determine if they're a top producer or not. You need to speak with them to understand the story. And, we find really strong reps in that same instance that are just amazing representatives that people might overlook or never find them because of that exact same situation. They're in a crappy territory or, whatever.
Mm-hmm. I want to learn a little bit more about what your process is, because we've kind of danced around it and we've hinted at it. I know, recruiting and identifying A players for an organization is your kind of sweet spot. What does your process look like for, from top of funnel to bottom of the funnel?
From sourcing to interviewing, everything?
Yeah.
That's going to take a long time.
Can you sum it up in 3 words?
3 words.
No, I can't.
Yeah, we were doing this for so long. It's we have built a playbook and process around all of it. So, I mean, at the front end, I can tell you, I can go kind of quick, but at the front end, it's a true understanding of the client's needs. And that means that they understand their needs and we understand their needs, and we're all on the same page in regards to the speed at which this is going to happen, because we move very quickly. The second thing is to agree on our search strategy. So we understand competition, companies that we're going after, the market. We understand everything. As we go to market, now we bring data to our clients. And while most companies think they know exactly what they're looking for in their next hire, in actuality, when we start to bring them really good talent, it actually screws them up a little bit, because they're like, wow, we never had this level of talent before. And so now they're starting to adjust and change and pivot and tweak. And they say, wow, these 2 candidates, this is exactly what we're looking for. Keep helping us find individuals like this. So then our team, once we understand that skill set and we start introducing candidates, we start getting data and feedback. And so as we go to market, we continue to fine tune and get better at our searches. Usually 6 to 10 people, you're going to make a hire. Somewhere in that range from us, right? And the entire time is communication. So we go to market. As we go to market, we are bringing in, individuals, and we're meeting with them and interviewing them. We do a full interview. It could take 45 minutes. It could take an hour. And the reason why it takes so long is because we start at as early as pre-college. We're trying to figure who are these people. And those personality characteristics help us to understand who they are. We want to know what their story is. Besides just looking at them on paper, we need to understand the story, because the story is what's going to help us figure out what type of performer this person is. And there's a lot, salespeople are creatures of habit. So you can find a lot of commonalities. Did they work in high school at a local pizza place? Did they ride their bike to work every day? Did they go out and, this was like my daughter. She's, recently she's a junior. She was an SDR at a technology company. She literally rode her bike to the pizza place down the street, and she got a job there. She went in, asked for the job. She saved all her money. She bought her own car. She wanted to do it herself, right? She became an SDR, and her counterpart, the rep, gave them a whole bunch of leads. She cold called every single one of hers, right? So, you want to understand, what is this? Where did this person come from? What kind of family did they grow up in? Did they grow up in an entrepreneurial environment? Were their parents in sales? We're trying to understand everything. That sounds crazy at all levels, but it's not, because once you start to understand the story, you realize they were a family. They were the youngest of 5, and they had to really work their tail off to make things happen. They had to pay for their education, and they financed their college degree, and they were the captain of the soccer team or the field hockey team or the basketball team. And they got wonderful grades, and their first job out of school was maybe was an SDR. And they worked really hard. And, the whole way through, saying they were the number 1 SDR. And why was that? Because I made more phone calls and I did more emails, and then you will follow their career. And by the way, that recap is pretty quick, because as you get into their career, you're really starting to figure out, what have you done? What have you sold? Who have you sold to? Where have your successes been? You've worked at a small company and you worked at small companies and large companies. Your greatest successes was a $50 million company with an average deal size of $250,000 and a 1.2 or 1.5 or $2 million quota, right? What are we looking for in your next search? And if we were to look historically back at your background based on your characteristics and your successes, we would suggest a company that looks very similar to this one. Would you agree? Yes. Or we would suggest looking at a management role, or a director role, or a VP role, or a CRO role, or a GM role. But the idea is, we need to understand their entire background. We need to understand their skill set, what they've sold, and then we can make recommendations and suggestions as to what a good next step is in their career and how they can add value both professionally as well as financially.
Gotcha. I'd love to understand some of the questions. It sounds like you're we've got you start in the early days, you've got a chronological kind of perspective. Are there any, outside of the usual stuff, are there any kind of Dan Fantasia specials that you like to ask that really light up a conversation for you?
No trick questions. I think the best question is, I wouldn't consider this an interview. So you don't have to sell me, right? I'm not going to sell you. You don't sell me. Let's just figure out what you've done. Take down all the barriers, take off all the pressure should be gone. Let's have a real conversation so we can understand where you're the strongest and where you're going to find the greatest amount of success. And then we'll talk about companies that meet that requirement so that you can continue to further your career and be successful. So I don't want to ask any trick questions, because the more unusual questions, the more a person kind of tightens up and holds you at arm's length. I'm trying to do the opposite. Let's really figure this out. If we can't figure this out together, we're going to end up making a mistake. And if we make a mistake, that's not great for anybody. And I suggest and recommend the same thing to hiring companies. Just have a real conversation. No one needs to be selling each other. We need to be figuring out if it's a good fit. If it's a good fit, you can sustain a really strong sales force.
And so I thank you. I appreciate that. And for context, for people who haven't figured out, Dan's a recruiter. So he's doing this on behalf of companies, hence why you can say, hey, I'm going to try and match it with multiple companies. It sounds like, so that's the kind of opener to get the guard down. Then you've got this process where you get them to, in an hour, kind of walk through their history. You're trying to understand the transitions, the motivations, how they paid for things. I get the sense you're looking for self-motivated folks. Is that interview 1, or is that kind of carried through a few interviews?
Interview 1.
And
we usually, while I'm saying we talk about their early experience, we start with where they are presently, and we actually work our way back. But I bring up the early stage of their career because it helps, it's the foundation of who they are, and it really tells a lot. And most of our clients, believe it or not, they want to know that story. They don't, it's easy to just get a resume and look at a resume and say, okay, this is a great person for you. We're trying to explain why they're a great person for you. We're trying to understand the attributes that you can't see on a resume. We're trying to, talk about these stories and explain why we think this person is so strong and why we think they're a good fit for your organization.
Gotcha. Yeah, I follow you there. And so first interview, so obviously you go through a pile of resumes, you have this first interview where you're getting the kind of story. How do you communicate fit? How do you assess them? Is there like something after that first meeting, are you filling out a scorecard? Is there some sort of like a brief for the client? Like, help me understand that piece.
Yeah, that's good. So we do fill out a scorecard. We have built technology that gives our clients a three-dimensional overview of the individual's background. And that is awesome because it's totally transparent. And, we only do sales, right? We only work in the sales market. So, it's a really cool app. You can see with full transparency who this individual is, what their average deal size is, their sales cycle. Again, all those things on the scorecard. Why we think they're a good fit, why we think or maybe why we're concerned about their fit. But all the information is going to be right there and shared with you so that when you look at one of these Treeline resumes, you'll know that we've talked to the candidates, we've qualified the candidate, you can see their background, and within 5 minutes, you can look at a person and say, oh yeah, I understand why Treeline is writing these great things. I see it in their background. This is a person that I like to talk to.
Gotcha. What are those? I'm going to ask a dumb question, but what are those 3 dimensions? Is it just like, is it a 3D graph, like a 3D pie chart with multiple, or is it like, are you looking at 3 different axes kind of thing?
Yeah, it's like social. It's their social photo, LinkedIn, contact information. It is their compensation expectations, super critical for all companies. We don't want to go through this process to find out that we're wasting everyone's time. So that's super important. It's also very important for a company because as companies are interviewing, those compensation expectations can give you a lot of data. If you're looking at, let's just say 3 to 5 years in a certain industry or with a certain skill set, and you realize that 3 to 5 years is bringing you candidates that are $20,000 more in base salary, then you either need to reduce your requirement or increase your compensation. Below that, it's their title, the audience they've sold to, their average deal size, their sales cycle, their quota, whether they're selling a product or service, whether they're selling strategic or transactional, their quota for the past 2 years, the percentage of quota. We'll do a recruiter write-up, with a whole bunch of information as to why we like the candidate. We have interview availability so that no one's wasting time. If you like a candidate, it's all right there. If you like a candidate, let's set them up. You should be talking to them within 24 hours. Everyone gets to share notes. Everyone on the team gets to share and log in and see what's happening in the process, and they can see the workflow. And then, of course, lastly, you get just the candidate regular resume. So all of that information, it just helps companies with the workflow, manage the process, and understand who the candidates are and what the right match is.
I love that. Okay, Dan, that's so interesting. I want to be respectful of time. I'm curious, what would be if people are listening and they're like, all right, I'm looking for folks, I'm trying to do my planning for next year. What's one piece of advice you would give somebody, a sales leader, a CEO who's looking to make a hire or multiple hires in the next 3 to 6 months?
Ooh. The first thing I'd say is timing. We're a few weeks away from Thanksgiving, and then you start to run into the holiday wall. So if you are looking to ramp up a 2024 sales team, the first thing I'd do is I'd sit down and I look at the calendar. I'd look at everyone involved in the process, and I'd understand who's in the office, when can they talk, and what the urgency level is. And if you have the urgency and the team's on the same page and no one's on vacation and you want to move at lightning speed, then you can get this done and you can get it done this year. If that is not the case, you're going to kick off a search, there's going to be delays, and all the top talent, really good people you're talking to are going to fall off because once they get to the holidays, they're probably telling you you're going to finish the year, or maybe they have a bonus set up or what have you. So either you start now and the whole team's on board and you move with record speed, or you stop building pipeline in December, realizing that you're not going to hire until sometime in Q1, January, February, March, somewhere around there. So now the greatest piece of advice and this is totally taken for granted, is stop for a second, look at the calendar, and realize how many business days are left in the year, and who on your team can help you, who's involved in the process, and will they be there at your side making this a priority and get it done.
Right on. I want to ask my last question here as kind of a lead in to tell me about Treeline. If people are thinking about making a hire, why should they think about using a recruiter in the first place? And second question, why should they think about using Treeline?
Most of the time, if they have the resources to find the talent, then they don't need a recruiter. But what tends to happen, especially in sales recruiting, because it's just not a lot of us out there, is the team doesn't really have the ability to bring top producers. I mean, it's hard to find a top producer, and then it's even harder to convince them to talk to you, to consider new opportunities. And so if your recruiting team or your talent acquisition team isn't that strong, but maybe they're strong with engineering and ops and all the other roles that they are trying to recruit for, if they're not strong on bringing in salespeople, then basically you're going to end up hiring the best of the worst. And it's going to be really hard for you to build a talented sales organization. The reason why people use us, the reason why our clients come to us, is because we're exclusive to sales. So everything under the sales umbrella, we recruit for. We have been in business for 22 years, exclusively recruiting sales professionals. So we've helped SDRs that are now CROs. We have an incredible network of sales individuals and access to talent that companies just don't have access to. And so if you think all of a sudden with no network like that, you can just start a search and find an enterprise software salesperson to join your team and do it quickly in 30 days, you're asking your talent acquisition team to do a lot. When you come to us, you have a team of 20 recruiters. We've been doing this for over 2 decades. We have a database. We have individuals that are selectively considering opportunities, but they're the top reps in their organization, and they're looking for the right opportunity. When we talk to you, we can then introduce them and get them excited about your opportunity. But for you to find that person is nearly impossible. I mean, it's taken us 22 years to build this network, to have the influence that we have, to be able to reach out and connect with the right individuals that are selling to the right audience for your organization. And no matter how challenging or unusual your search is, we always nail it. It's what we do. We are awesome at recruiting salespeople. So if you're serious about building and hiring top performers for your organization, it is likely that you will need assistance and help. And if you use our organization, one of the services you can use is our contingency service, which means that there is no charge. If our candidates aren't better than what your team is bringing you, don't hire them and it will cost you nothing. If they are better, it is well worth the experience, the relationship, and the fee to get that person on board.
Right on. Dan, if people are looking to get in touch, what's the best way for them to find you?
I'd go to Dan Fantasia on LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn, just go to Dan Fantasia, message me or connect with me, not a problem. Or go to our website, treelineinc.com. Go to the chat bot, ask for Dan Fantasia, or hit a contact us form and just say, I'd love to chat with Dan Fantasia. I'm happy to brainstorm and talk through your current selling model or your recruiting model. And you don't have to purchase our services just to brainstorm.
Love it. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, Collin, thanks for having me.
Got it. And thanks everybody for listening. We'll see y'all next week.